Having recently raised a funding round at a $180 billion valuation, SpaceX is believed to be the most valuable privately held company in the US. It's not hard to see why investors are so interested in the company. Of the 212 successful rocket launches in 2023, 98 of them were done by SpaceX, giving them almost 50% market share. Their Starlink satellite internet service is used by millions of people around the world, generating billions of dollars in revenue. SpaceX has raised an estimated $9 billion from the likes of Sequoia Capital, Andreessen Horowitz, Peter Thiel's Founder Fund, Fidelity Investments, and many others. And it's not just venture capitalists that have bought into the hype. In March of this year, a closed-ended fund holding shares in SpaceX listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Retail investors piled into this fund, at one point pumping the valuation up to a 2,000% premium over its net asset value. However, there's one important aspect of SpaceX which could drastically alter the risk-reward profile for investors. Musk has made it clear for many years that his ultimate goal with the company is to launch manned missions to and eventually colonize Mars. By his own admission, this will cost tens of billions of dollars. Whatever profits SpaceX ever generates will likely all be used to fund Musk's Mars ambitions. Little, if any, SpaceX's profits will ever be distributed to shareholders. The value of any business is the present value of future cash flows. But if all the cash flows will be consumed by the Mars mission, maybe the company isn't worth anything at all. In this video, we'll look at the history of SpaceX, Musk's motivations, and why it might be little more than one giant grift. SpaceX was founded by Elon Musk in 2002. His idea was to create reusable rockets which could launch satellites into space for a fraction of the prevailing cost at the time. From the very beginning, he also had the motivation of eventually sending humans to Mars. In 2001, before he even founded SpaceX, Musk was involved in the Mars Society, a non-profit organization that advocates for human colonization of the Red Planet. He appears to have been involved with the Mars Society throughout the early 2000s. Musk thinks it's a good idea to set up a permanent colony on Mars. If Earth ever faces an apocalyptic event, the human race will live on. Over the following years, SpaceX has made great advancements in rocket technology. They began generating revenue by sending payloads to the International Space Station on behalf of NASA, as well as sending satellites into orbit on behalf of both government and commercial customers. Eventually, they developed reusable rockets, allowing them to launch payloads into space at a far cheaper price than had ever been accomplished in the past. In 2019, SpaceX started deploying its own Starlink satellites, which provide internet connectivity to remote areas, which may not have access to cable or fiber-based internet. Building the world's most successful space company hasn't been cheap, and up until recently, the company has been burning cash. SpaceX was initially funded by Musk's own funds, but quickly needed outside capital. Since inception, the company has raised about $9 billion from outside investors. These equity raises have diluted Musk's ownership of the company, down to about 40%. But the company has a dual-class share structure, and Musk still retains about 80% of the voting shares. SpaceX reportedly generated $9 billion of revenue in 2023. According to Musk, they first reached cash flow break-even in November of 2023. In a 2021 interview, Elon Musk explained his future outlook and plans for SpaceX.
The launch side of things, just launching other people's satellites and serving the space station, probably tops out around $3 or $4 billion a year of revenue. Whereas if we can get to say 3% of global internet traffic, then that's roughly $1 trillion a year business. Then we can increase our revenue by an order of magnitude to more like 30 billion or something like that, and then we can use the proceeds from that to develop the rocket technology necessary to get humanity to Mars and to the moon and elsewhere in the solar system.
The market for satellite launches is limited. By Musk's own admission, the maximum opportunity for SpaceX is $3 to $4 billion per year. Given that they already had $9 billion of total revenue in 2023, they've likely already maxed out this revenue stream. As of April of 2024, SpaceX claims to have 2.7 million Starlink customers. The cheapest Starlink plan costs $120 per month in the US, but there are more expensive options that can be significantly more expensive. So Starlink is generating annual revenue of at least $4 billion on a run rate basis. If Starlink continues to grow, the company has the potential to become very profitable. It's thus not that hard to see why venture capitalists value the company at $180 billion. It's one thing for a company to make profits, but for investors to make a return, the profits eventually need to be distributed to shareholders. If you paid attention to the Musk interview we just played, he said he will use the revenue from Starlink to fund his Mars ambitions. So what exactly are Musk's plans for Mars, and what does this mean for SpaceX shareholders? In 2016, Musk gave an hour-long presentation where he explained SpaceX's plan to set up a colony on Mars. They'll create a massive spaceship big enough to carry 100 passengers each. They'll build 1,000 of these spaceships, and eventually transport 1 million people to Mars over the course of 40 to 100 years. Of course, this isn't going to be cheap. Musk claims that once they make technological improvements and achieve economies of scale, the marginal cost of sending someone to Mars will be $200,000. But by his own admission, it will cost many billions, if not many tens of billions of dollars to develop these spaceships. Here, Musk explains how he plans to fund this endeavor.
So funding, we thought about funding sources. And so we've got steel underpants, launch satellites, send cargo to the space station, Kickstarter, of course, followed by profit. So obviously it's going to be a challenge to fund this whole endeavor. We do expect to generate pretty decent net cash flow from launching lots of satellites and servicing the space station from NASA, transferring cargo to and from the space station, and then I know that there's a lot of people in the private sector who are interested in helping fund a base on Mars, and then perhaps there will be interest on the government sector side to also do that. I think as we show that this is possible, that this dream is real, not just a dream, it's something that can be made real, I think the support will snowball over time. And I should say also the main reason I'm personally accumulating assets is in order to fund this. So I really don't have any other motivation for personally accumulating assets except to be able to make the biggest contribution I can to making life multiplanetary.
Musk seeks to tap a few sources of funds for the Mars mission. Firstly, the profits generated from SpaceX's current satellite launch and Starlink businesses. Secondly, he hopes to eventually secure funding from the private sector and governments. Thirdly, he'll commit his own personal assets, presumably from his Tesla shares. A few months ago, we released a video covering Musk's controversial $55 billion pay package from Tesla. As we discussed in that video, Musk used his Mars ambitions to justify the proposed pay package. In 2017, he emailed Tesla's general counsel saying, quote, "The added comp is just so that I can put as much as possible towards minimizing existential risk by putting the money towards Mars if I am successful in leading Tesla to be one of the world's most valuable companies. This is kinda crazy, but it's true," unquote. It's clear that Musk is obsessed with going to Mars. He has even said that he personally wants to die on Mars. Given that he's willing to extract money from Tesla to fund the Mars mission, it's probably a safe bet to assume he will spend all of SpaceX's profits on this endeavor as well. And since he owns a majority of the voting shares, there's nothing minority investors can do to stop him. In 2016, Musk said that they would launch the first manned mission to Mars in 2024. This has since been delayed to 2029. But let's say they eventually do get to Mars. Could they generate enough revenue from Mars to recoup their investment? The short answer is almost certainly no. Mars has no breathable air. Its average temperature is minus 57 degrees Celsius, which is about the same as Antarctica. Its lack of a magnetic field means there's little protection from solar radiation. Spending long periods of time on the surface of the planet will lead to very high risks of developing cancer. There is no liquid water, and the gravity is about 1/3 of Earth's gravity. Long-term exposure to low gravity can cause muscle atrophy and bone density loss. Musk has come up with fantastical plans to build enclosed greenhouses to grow crops in an entire self-sustaining city. But even if this were theoretically possible, why would anyone want to live there? As an analogy, throughout the late 1800s and early 1900s, various governments sent exploration missions to Antarctica. These were considered to be great scientific and technological achievements. Today, there are a couple thousand people in Antarctica at any given time. Most of them are researchers working for government agencies or tourists who go there to see penguins. Antarctic research stations are generally powered by diesel generators. Food and fuel are imported at great cost. Nobody lives in Antarctica permanently. It's probably theoretically possible to build a self-sustaining civilization in Antarctica. You could survive off of fish and maybe set up nuclear or wind power generation. But nobody does this. There's nothing to do in Antarctica that can remotely justify the massive costs and extremely difficult living conditions. The situation on Mars will be 100 times worse than Antarctica. Even if Musk could bring down the cost of a ticket to $200,000 as he claims, why would anybody want to go there? It's already far cheaper than this to go to Antarctica, yet nobody lives there. Despite these problems, Musk still appears fully committed to Mars. SpaceX is currently working on testing their new Starship rocket. They plan to use this to launch larger Starlink satellites into orbit. It will also be used for NASA's Artemis mission, which is expected to happen at some point after 2026. Musk claims that Starship will also be used to go to Mars. Even once the Starship is capable of going to the moon, it will require billions of dollars of additional research and development to conduct manned missions to Mars, which is 145 times farther away than the moon. Their goal of producing 1,000 Starships to go to Mars will consume a nearly unlimited amount of capital. Whatever profits SpaceX makes from Starlink or satellite launches can easily be consumed by the Mars mission. Musk himself says his main goal in accumulating material wealth is to fund the Mars mission. If he wants to do this, it's his prerogative. Musk has an uncanny ability to raise billions upon billions of dollars for his companies, despite openly saying shareholder returns are not his main goal. The likes of Fidelity, Sequoia Capital, etc. have a fiduciary duty to maximize returns for their own investors. It's hard to see how funding Musk's Mars pipe dream could possibly be consistent with this. We saw something similar with his acquisition of Twitter in 2022. Musk's motivations behind buying Twitter were ideological, not financial. He made no secret of this. Yet he was still able to raise billions of dollars from many of the same investors who were invested in SpaceX. The results have been disastrous. There may be a greater fool aspect for the venture capitalists who invest in SpaceX. Even if they never receive dividends, they can still make a return by selling their shares to someone else at a higher price. Given Musk's popularity, retail investors may be drawn to investing in SpaceX, despite the corporate governance issues. Recently, a closed-ended fund called Destiny Tech 100 listed its shares on the New York Stock Exchange. About one-third of the fund's portfolio is invested in SpaceX stock. Destiny Tech 100 is the first ever opportunity for retail investors to indirectly invest in SpaceX. The fund's net asset value is about $5 per share. As of the time of making this video, its share price is $15, which represents a 3 times premium. At its peak, retail investors pumped the stock price up to $100, which is a 20 times premium. If you want to learn more about Destiny Tech 100, we released a video about it on our second channel, Broken Business Models, linked in the description below. The venture capitalists funding SpaceX today may be hoping for an eventual IPO, which would allow them to cash out by dumping their shares onto retail investors. From Musk's perspective, he likely doesn't care how much his stake in SpaceX is diluted. If he's never going to pay any distributions to shareholders anyway, his economic ownership in the company is irrelevant. And thanks to the dual-class share structure, he can maintain voting control of the company regardless of how many non-voting shares he issues. Alright guys, that wraps it up for this video. What do you think about Elon Musk and SpaceX? Let us know in the comment section below. As always, thank you so much for watching and we'll see you in the next one. Wall Street Millennial, signing out.